I went from a 20-year-old Apple intern on 30k per year to an Amazon engineer at 23 on 111k. And in this video, I'm going to show you my exact career progression and what I focus on to allow me to do this so you can do it for yourself. Now, we're going to be covering everything from start to finish, from my start of my career to where I'm at now. Now, currently, I'm a 24-year-old senior engineer, ex-Apple, ex-Amazon. So let me actually break down to you what my career progression looked like from start to finish. Now, my career actually started whilst I was still in university. Now, I was 20 years old and I was looking for a second internship, and this was in the second summer of university, or at least coming up to it. Now, I was 20 years old at the time and I needed an internship. I didn't know where to focus. So I went and got an offer from my old employer for my first internship, but I wanted something else. I wanted something different. I wanted to push the limits and the boundaries of what I could set for myself. So I decided to go on LinkedIn and try to find other internships. Now, I found one at Apple. It was a cybersecurity information internship. And that's right up my street because that is, of course, my niche. So I decided to apply to it. And I applied to it whilst I was in a digital forensics lecture. And I didn't really think much of it. I just kind of did it and then just thought, okay, well, whatever happens, happens. Now, 1 month goes by. 2 months go by. 3 months go by and I hear nothing back. By this point in time, I've completely forgot I even applied, right? So I was just looking for other internships, but I still had that backup plan of the first internship because I had an offer from them. So I was okay. I was chilling. I had an internship, but I didn't think much else. About 4 months go by after applying for Apple, and I hear back from them. I get an email in my inbox about 9:08 a.m. on a Thursday. I still remember it to this day. And they say, congratulations, we wish to provide you an interview for the internship position. Now, bearing in mind, this is second year of university. I'm 20 years old. I have less than 6 months worth of experience and only a few certifications. So I scheduled in the interviews with them. Bearing in mind, right, when I applied for this position, the applications alone, there was 200 applicants who applied for this position in a 24-hour period. And it specified on the job posting that there's only 2 positions available in the UK. So I was already at a loss in terms of the ratio here. I scheduled in the interviews. I had the first, so there was 3 technical stages and then 1 behavioral. The behavioral was first, so I had that with HR and that went smoothly. I then had the 3 technical interview stages. So these 3 technical stages actually allowed me to showcase off my technical skill set, stand out against all of the other candidates, and essentially win them over, right? Because essentially with interviews, we're trying to win them over, but in a non-desperate way. So we want to showcase our authority, for example, which I'll get into in a bit later. But I focused on that. After that, I then got the offer. So I'm 20 years old. I have an Apple internship offer, and it was for £30,000 a year, pro rata, which essentially means that it was 4 months long. So it's 30k divided by 12 times by 4. So whatever I would earn in a whole year, that's divided by 12. And then whatever I make in a month, that's times by 4 because it was 4 months long. Now, I did this internship at Apple, and it was, to be able to get this, you had to be very specific on what you focus on. You had to have, systems, infrastructure. I teach this in other lessons, so go and watch those. But you have to be very specific on it. You can't just focus on technical skill sets and feel like you're going to get it. Now, when I had this offer, when I actually completed the internship, I went back to university for a year to complete my studies because I had the final year of university. I wanted to get my bachelor's degree. So I went back, I finished my studies. I came back as a graduate at Apple in the information security team. Now, this was because of my performance within the internship and also, of course, how the company was doing overall. This was a brand new program. It was called ISDP, which is Information Security Development Program. And it's still relatively new. I think it's only been alive for 3 or 4 years now. But I was one of the first in the UK to ever be on it. So when I came back, I was on that program. So I was 21 years old. I had a graduate position lined up at Apple in cyber security. Now, the thing is though, right, I was trying to, in the last year, I was just trying to figure out the numbers that I would roughly be on, right? I was like, well, the internship's 30k, so at minimum it's going to be 30k. I mean, maybe it could be like 40k, maybe at best, like pure best, 60k, because I'm a graduate, right? I have no experience, anything like that. I get a phone call from a recruiter, and it's the recruiter that, of course, gave me the offer for Apple as the graduate position. And he ran me through the numbers. And in total compensation, it was £72,000 a year. So at this point in time, I was officially a 21-year-old with a graduate position at Apple in tech on £72,000 a year. It over exceeded the expectations I ever had for the compensation that I would have possibly been on. So that was something that was quite nice. Now, when I actually started this graduate position, I started in a very specific team. It was the incident response team. I won't get into the cyber specifics because I understand that some of you may not be actually in cyber yourself. But I had two roles when I was at Apple. I was in incident response, so looking at cyber threats, malware, and so forth. I then moved into vulnerability response, which was going to be looking at security research reports and seeing how we can make Apple more secure. Now, after about 10 months in the incident response team, I moved into the vulnerability response team for about a year and a half. And the interesting part about this ISDP program that I was on is the fact that after you spend a year in the program, and if you perform well, you get a promotion from entry level, which is ICT 2, to mid level, which is ICT 3. So I got this promotion after 1 year of spending it at Apple, and bearing in mind this is 22 years old, more or less. So I've went from a 20-year-old intern at Apple to a 21-year-old graduate at Apple to a 22-year-old mid-level engineer at Apple. And of course, this came with a pay increase. So I went from 72k total compensation per year to 94k total compensation per year, which means I got, more or less a £20,000 pay increase by simply just staying there a year, which is something that you naturally have to do. To get that numbers, you have to leave the companies and go and join another one, which of course I didn't have to do in this case. So I'm 22 years old. I'm on close to six figures. I'm at Apple. Where do I go from here? So I moved into the VR team, the vulnerability response team. I stayed there for about a year and a half. I then got headhunted out of the company by Amazon, another FANG company. And I'm 23 years old still at this point. And I go through the interview loops at Amazon, right? There's like a leadership principles one, there's a behavioral interview one, there's 4 different technical ones, including live coding assessments, at least 2 of them that I had. So there's that. I went through that whole process. I then was awarded an offer by the end of it, right? And once again, goes back to the Apple internship position, but it's not all about your technical skill sets. You have to showcase yourself in a very particular way with positioning to be able to actually attract the interest in the first place and maintain that level of authority throughout the interview process. So that's something to also consider as well. So I get an offer from Amazon. They offer me, I think it's like 95 or 96k per year. Now, bearing in mind, I'm at Apple for 94k. So leaving for a 2k increase, especially after taxes, it's going to be incredibly minimal. I'm going to get like an extra £1,000 a year, something like that. So I didn't reject the offer, but I went through a negotiation stage with them. And this was through emails and a few calls I had with the recruiter. But I was very strategic on how I did this because I've heard stories personally from people that I've worked with who have pushed too hard in negotiation stages and had their offer rescinded, taken away from them because of greed. So I was very careful on the strategies that I implemented for this negotiation over email. But across 2 emails, like 2 separate emails, not threads, 2 emails, I managed to raise the total compensation that they were asking or that they were providing me from about 95, 96k to 111k per year. So I'm now officially a 2 times ex-FANG engineer on over 6 figures, now working at Amazon. So I decided to take the offer. So I ended up going to Amazon for roughly a year, and I was a security engineer there in the vulnerability management and remediation operations team. So I was essentially fixing security vulnerabilities, similar to what I was doing in the vulnerability response team at Apple. This was how I actually went into a six-figure salary at Amazon in 3 short years from starting my career. I started my career at 20 years old as an Apple intern, and that moved me into a 23-year-old Amazon engineer on 111K per year. And this is about being hyper specific with your choices and opportunities that you have. Now, everybody has opportunities. If you think that you haven't, that's because you're not aware to them at the moment. But everybody has opportunities and unique ones to themselves. And it's up to you to identify those opportunities, but not only that, to actually take them. Because if you identify opportunities and don't take them, you might as well have just stayed naive to them. So you need to identify some of the best opportunities you currently have as playing cards on the table. You then want to capitalize on that by taking the opportunities. And the opportunities can be anything, right? I'll give you a clear example. For the first internship that I got, even before Apple, I got that position because one time, I think it was like Wednesday in like an evening, it was like 9 p.m. or something. I was 17 at the time, 17 years old. I was doing A-levels. I was on LinkedIn in my evenings, right? Bearing in mind, most people are out, partying or hanging out with their friends or asleep or playing video games or whatever. I was at this point in time, I was on LinkedIn and I was scrolling through the jobs. I found one for a full-time security consultant position. And this was at a company called F-Secure. It's now called WithSecure. But that was where I had my first internship. But I applied for a full-time role. I had the first interview there. They then put me forward for the internship because, of course, I couldn't balance it with my studies. So that was a direct or an indirect opportunity, right? Because if I wasn't even on LinkedIn in the evenings, I wouldn't have ever seen that position to apply to then basically transfer myself into the internship position, which of course gave me some experience to actually line myself up well for the Apple internship position. So you need to be able to identify the choices and opportunities that you have that are direct and indirect. Indirect means that you have a direct opportunity at the time, you take it, but it leads to indirect ones in the future. So for example, that first internship that I got, that was a direct opportunity for having an internship, but it was an indirect opportunity that would lead me in the future to working at Apple and Amazon because of having that experience to be able to get me through the door a bit more. So you need to identify the opportunities, and that's something that I actively worked on consistently every single day, every single week, trying to find the best ones in the market for any current period of time that I was in at that point. So if I was 20 years old, I found the Apple position on LinkedIn. If I was 21 years old, I figured out how to, perform well to be able to get that promotion to mid-level. There's always going to be opportunities and you need to be able to identify them. Now, there's another thing, and I mentioned this a bit earlier, but this is about your technical skill sets. It's not always about how you perform technically, which dictates if you get the offer. And you've been told by so many unqualified people that your technical skill sets are the only thing that genuinely matters. And I'm here to break that loop. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. And the reason why that is not the case is because there's a lot more that goes into the interview process cycle than just technical skill sets. That is only going to be for the technical interviews. But what happens about application acceptance? What happens to nurturing recruiters and hiring managers? What happens to actually having the screening calls? What happens to the behavioral interviews? What happens to the online assessments? What happens to the negotiating of offers? How would you be able to do any of that to a competent degree if you only had a decent, strong technical skill set and you grind out leak code every day? So marketing and positioning is something that I focused so much on for Apple and for Amazon. And the reason for that is because that holds the most weight. And this is something that I've noticed myself. I had to engineer this myself because I didn't know this when I was starting out. I just had to do trial and error. I spent 4 years trying to figure out how to land decent tech roles that I actually wanted to have. And what I come up with was this marketing system and strategies that essentially allowed me to stand out above every other candidate. And the way that this works is essentially, whilst all of the other candidates are focusing on their technical skill sets, I was over here focusing on providing an edge in the market through marketing positioning, showcasing my credibility and authority, and increasing my demand in the company's minds. So everybody else is focusing on technical skill sets and they're getting rejections, ghostings, they're not hearing back from recruiters or hiring managers, and they're doing cold outreach all of the time. Whereas I'm over here and I'm focusing on things that genuinely matter, that can influence the decision for hiring. And that is how I managed to go from a 20-year-old intern on 30K to a 23-year-old Amazon engineer on 111K in 3 short years. So I would focus on identifying the opportunities that you currently have available, capitalizing on them, and focusing on providing an edge in the market to yourself through marketing and positioning that will allow you to do that. Now, I'll break this down in a deeper video, but that is going to be how I managed to do it so you can do the same.